as an educator with the Mount St. Helens Institute. Behind me you can see a mountain that's shaped like a pyramid. This pyramidal shaped feature behind me, called Tum Tum Mountain.
This one is called the Muscovites in California, or rather a demonstration of the passage from North America discovered by the Russians and of the ancient one of the peoples who migrated there from Asia. And one thing we should establish right off the bat is that Muscovites are Tartarians. A dissertation of the Terraqueous Globe. Chapter 3, the division of the habitable earth. Asia has the most land at 10 million square miles. And of all of the countries who own land, Tartary has more land than anybody, which includes the Chinese independent and the Muscovites.
Shout out to my boy Ryan Zim. What's up, my guy? Yo, he does amazing, stupendous work in relation to investigations. This is a good personal friend of mine. Shout out, we need to kick it again soon, brother. But this is another link in relation to the nation or land of Fusang, also known as America. So we're going to dive right into it, into the book, which is called Fusang, The Chinese Who Built America by Stan Steiner. This was wrote in 1990, and as you can see from the book cover here, you see a lot of people getting to work. Looks like they're really moving a lot of earth. This could be in relation to the railroads. This could be in a lot to many different things. So in the first chapter it says, the voyage to the land of Fusang in 1441 AD. Where the sun rises in the land of Fusang, there is my home. Seeking fame and riches, I came to the land of eternal flowers. Anonymous. Quote, and this Fusang, the oriental garden of the Hesperides, is Atlantis of the East, the home of the fairies, is our own fair California. Unquote. Los Angeles Times. On a bold voyage in the 5th century, several Buddhist missionaries may have landed on the shores of America by mistake. Quote, in the year of Young Yuan, during the Qi dynasty in 449 AD, a priest by the name of Hu Xin came to Qingchao. He told of the kingdom of Fusang, America, that was 20,000 li, about 7,000 miles to the east of Tahan. And that country was to the east of China, unquote. So it was written in the 41st book of Chuan, in the 230th volume of the Great Chinese Encyclopedia, compiled by court historians of the Liang emperors of 502 to 556 AD. Fusang was a strange land, said Hu Xin, but it was not barbarian. He talked of the people there as being remarkably human and civilized, considering that they were not Chinese. Quote, they have neither arms nor armor, unquote, said the priest, quote, nor do they make war, unquote, since they were peaceful for the most part. Quote, they have no walled towns, unquote, as in China, but seem to live in harmony with one another. Quote, they possess a mode of writing and they make paper from the bark of the fou-sang tree, he said, and from the bark they also made their clothing. Surely an industrious people. In this land of fusang, he said, the people had domesticated a breed of cattle with very long horns, most likely deer. They used these cattle or deer as beasts of burden, and they milked them to make a food drink from their milk, possibly yogurt. Still, they did have a few uncivilized customs. One of these, Hu Xin said, was the power given to the women of Fusang. In marriage, it was the bride who chose the husband. If the woman does not accept him, he is sent away, but if he pleases her, the marriage is consummated. The perplexed priest observed. No wonder, in later chronicles, the kingdom of Fusang was sometimes confused with the land despairing known as the country of women. The modern Chinese man of the 5th century knew there could be no land where women choose men. In spite of this dubious feminism, the men of Fusang seemed happy, for it was a land of abundant liberty and freedom, said Hu Xin, where there was not only no wars, but unbelievably, there are no taxes. More than 1,000 years were to pass before Europeans heard of the Chinese discovery of this paradisical place. Even then, few believed it. One of few modern historians who has sought to record the voyages of these fantastic seamen was Charles Chapman, who devoted a fascinating chapter in A History of California to the Chinese along the Pacific coast in ancient times. The early explorers from China, he wrote, not only crossed the ocean, as did Hu Xian, but left their mark on the Native American cultures, and so there are similarities between the old Mexican religion and early Buddhism that are many and striking. There are similarities as well in rituals, in sculpture, and in language, which Chapman attributed to the adventurous voyages of the seafarers from South China who reached the Americas long before the Europeans. If the Chinese coming to America was a fantasy, it was a realistic fantasy. The life that Hu Xian told of was as vivid and human as any tale of the European explorers, with their wild stories of native men with blue skies and long tails, and native women who were virgin as Eve and as evil as witches. The paradise of the Chinese travelers was not only more realistic, it existed somewhere. As a Buddhist priest, Hu Xian was content with his perfect kingdom. He talked admirably of the peaceful lands he had discovered, where the people lived so morally and so purely that he noted with awe neither gold nor silver is esteemed them in fusang. There was only one thing wrong with these people. By his belief, they know not the laws of the Buddha. So it was that in the second year of the dynasty of the Sung, 458 AD, monks came to this country from the land of Chipin, Kabul, or Kofine, said Hu Xian, and they spread the sacred books and images of Buddha to instruct the people in the holy ascetic life, and this made a change in the custom of the people. The people became Buddhists. Tiong Pao on page 16. Again, the publication date on this was 1890. Publisher was E.J. Linden. And this is in French, English, and in German. And it says, Yuan says that we read in the great commentary of Chang Chao that the extreme limit of the eastern countries, east of the rock K, up to the plain of Fusang, where the sun rises, is governed by the genius Tai Hao Kao Meng Hoai Nan. Tzi says more expressly that the extreme limit of the eastern countries extends from Mount Chi across Chaosian or Korea and through the land of the giants to the east, in the place where the sun rises, the land of the crazy tree, from the plain to the green and wooded land, so that the region governed by Cao Meng and Tai Hao occupies an area 12,000 Chinese BC. Another quick translations, it says, as to their customs, the inhabitants of Fusang were very peaceful, having neither arms nor armor, and not making war. This still agrees very well with the mores of the inhabitants of the islands of Crafto, and is confirmed by all the travelers. We will once cite the judgment. There first says, there can be no doubt that they have much consideration for old people, and that their morals are very gentle. And certainly, if they were pastors and had many flocks, and I would not form any other idea of the customs and manners of the patriarchs. Another translation, this is German right here. Unity, quietness, good-naturedness, willingness, humility, all these really rare qualities which they do not owe to any refined culture, but which are only the sentiments of their natural character, make me, I know, for the best of all peoples that I know up till now. Shin forgot to name the fou-sang Jiao Fei, or Inspector of Morals, who was one of the great officers of the country and whose office is represented in Korea by the Kan, Kawan, Chi, Noise, Kien, Kon. We have seen that this office was given in 581 CE to a Korean who had been pushed to Fusang, or karafto, by contrary wind. So you see, one and the same is what they call in America, fusang, karafto, okay? Then right here it says, the king used, still on page 153, the king used to change the color every 2 years of his clothes from green to red, yellow, white, and black. There were 2 prisons, one for light criminals and the other for serious criminals sentenced to life imprisonment. However, the latter were allowed to marry on condition that the children become slaves. This is all from Hu Xin, right? All of his account. His account is very detailed, and people are going through his account in such detail and how it's describing America. A considerable man, on page 154, a considerable man was judged by a general assembly, and if he was condemned, he was buried alive after a farewell feast. The penalty extending according to the gravity of the crime to the sons and grandson, and sometimes up to the descendants of the 7th generation. As for the multicolored clothes worn by the king of the country during different years, Gabil has already noticed that among the Mongols and Manchus, the 10 Khan, which together with the 12 Chi form the Chinese sexagenary cycle, are named after colors. The first 2 years of this 10-year cycle are named green and pale green, the next 2 red and pale red, and then yellow and pale yellow, white and whitish, black and blackish. It is absolutely the color sequence of the king of Fusang's clothes, green, red, yellow, white, and black, which are the colors assigned to the 5 points and to the season. On page 157 he says, the shaman Hoshin reports that already in the year 458 of our era, 5 Bhikshu, or mendicant monks, had brought Buddhism from Kofin to Fusang, Krafto. He himself went there a few years later and returned in the year 499. Over into another book by Gustave Ichtal, which is a study of the Buddhist origins of American civilizations. This was published in 1865. And here with this quote on page 61 it says, let us remember, in fact, that the Buddhist missions were not only simple preachings, but also real colonizations. Let us also remember that between the certainly American establishment of fusang and the Buddhist countries of Asia, relations must have continued for a fairly long time, since just between the arrival of the first missionaries from Samarkand and the relation to Ho Chin, there is, as we have seen, a space of more than 50 years. Be that as it may, and whatever may be the cause, these mandants, in whom we see so evident the mark of a Buddhist influence, also bear the trace of an admixture with the white race. Here on page, I believe it says 18, it says, of Kaipin, ancient, Kofin, Gopin, Gofine, went to Fusang and spread there the law of Buddha. They brought with them the books, the holy images, the ritual, and instituted monastic customs, which caused the manners of the inhabitants to change, and we've gone over that. Chinese Exploration in America by Henriette Mertz. What's pretty outstanding is the contents within the chapters: Fusang, Mexican legends, Yucatan, Buddhist, Huishan. Fusang is today assumed by most to be nothing more than a legendary fantasy and geographical myth of Mexico, figment of the Buddhist imagination. Fusang is no geographical myth, it is real. In the 5th century, it was a vital, strategic spot. Huishan's visit there changed the entire course of its history. He it was who was instrumental in creating in it a magnificently brilliant civilization, the like of which the world has never seen. The much sought after answer to the riddle as to whether or not Asiatics were here in America at an early time has intrigued thousands of persons. There could not be one who has read stories written by the Spanish conquistadors, or even those concerning the problematical Mu, Atlantis, or Lemuria, who has not been disturbed by scores of conflicting emotions. Fusang has added to them. The Kingdom of Women. Hui Shan says that the Kingdom of Women is about 1,000 li, approximately 350 miles east of Fusang. The appearance of the people is neat and clean, and their color is white. Their bodies have hair and the hair of their heads is long, reaching to the ground. At the second or third month they enter the water and become pregnant. 7 or 6 months after they bear their young. The female chests are destitute of breasts. At the napes of their neck there is hair, and milk is in the hair at the back of the neck, and the infant is fed by that milk. Within 100 days the infant can walk, and in 3 or 4 years is adult. It is true. On seeing a human being, the women are afraid and hide. They have a great deal of respect for their husbands. The people eat a salt plant and leaves of which resemble a certain Chinese herb, and they have a pleasant pungent odor. In the year 507 AD, some men from Tsin Nagan, while crossing the sea, were blown by strong winds to an unknown coast. On going ashore, they found a people there whose language could not understand. The women were like those of China, but the men had human bodies with dogs' heads, and they made sounds like the barking of a dog. The people eat a small kind of bean or kernel. They wear clothing made of cloth. They beat down the earth and make adobe for the walls of their houses, the shape of which is circular, and doors or entrances resemble burrows. Now, it's not uncommon to hear of dog-headed people. We've seen plenty of icons showing dog-headed people. This has been spoken about a lot. The classics record that Hui Shan returned to China from Fusang in 499 AD. We do not know, however, at what date he arrived in Fusang or how long a time he spent there. Neither do we know whether or not he himself was one of the 5 Bi-Qiu, of whom he wrote as going to Fusang in 485 AD. Bishop Landa's quotation above noted recounted that Quetzalcoatl taught a religious idolatry that the people of Yucatan did not have before his coming, and that he insisted that it was necessary to practice it and to teach it. What statement could more fittingly describe a missionary Buddhist priest? Did he not go out with that express purpose in mind? Hui Xuan told about the 5 Buddhist priests who went to Fusang, taking with them their Buddhist books and images, and taught the people of that country their Buddhist religion, of which the people were ignorant before that time. He did the same. If the Indians told the Spaniards that Quetzalcoatl taught them this multiplicity of things that they had not known earlier, and if Hui Shan and Quetzalcoatl were one and the same, would a Chinese have had knowledge of all these arts and crafts? And would he have been likely to have transmitted that knowledge along with his religious teaching? Do our missionaries of today do the same thing? Do they bring a knowledge of agriculture or of medicine? Would a foreigner from any country other than China have possessed such extensive understanding as to be able to teach astronomy, weaving, metallurgy, agriculture, a calendar system, carving and polishing of jade, or fine feather work? Where else in the world would one go to find out about these things? And to how many countries would one have to travel to learn them all? Perhaps Egypt might have done so, but Egyptian priests were not missionary-minded, as were Buddhists. One Mayan story stated that Kukulkan came from the west, that he had neither wife nor child. Another Mayan legend related that when he left, he went back to Mexico, where he was deified as the Mexican god, Quetzalcoatl. Now, when we speak about this Kukulkan, we saw on a previous map how we had Atlan right below Fou-sang, right below the Mozambique, right below the Nastacares. Mexican accounts from the Valley of Mexico and the area around Cholula have him departing over the sea to the east, while those farther south, Chiapas and Oaxaca, told of his sailing west. On the surface the accounts appear contradictory, but they need not be. If one left from Cholula from the east coast and sailed from there across the Bay of Campeche to the east, he would land in the northwestern part of Yucatan. This would confirm both the Maya legend that he came from the west and the story from Cholula that he sailed to the east. On leaving Yucatan, the Maya said that he returned to Mexico. Therefore, Mexican accounts from the south to the state to where he came from the east would also be correct, since he returned from Yucatan. Zapotec and Mixtec Legends tell of his disappearance in a cloud of smoke, while others have him sail off towards the setting sun. In other words, Quetzalcoatl, the bearded white man, came into the Valley of Mexico from the west, sailed eastwards across the Bay of Campeche to the northwest corner of Yucatan, returned to Mexico by a southern route across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, and departed from the country on the Pacific side. Legendary material follows that pattern. Fusang was no geographical myth, figment of the Buddhist imagination that the plant fusang was corn and the country fusang was the western United States and Mexico, that the legendary bearded white man was more than legend. He was real, and it was he who was indirectly responsible for the conquest of Mexico 1,000 years after he had died. Watch out with the hijack though when they talk about white men. Like, not all Asians was like that, yo. That the source of the flood, stories of, and the biblical legends told to the conquistadors by the Indians may have come from Buddhist teaching. That the source of the Zapotec, Maya, and the Aztec calendar was Oriental. That the source of early Mexican writing was Oriental. That the source in both Peru and Mexico of the Mongolian spot and the epicanthic ifold can be attributed to the Chinese explorers. That the source of knowledge of weaving, ceramics, featherwork, and metallurgy, together with an understanding of astronomy and mathematics, stemmed from the Orient. That the root of the earliest Mexican religious philosophy, the dual principle, stems from the Chinese yin and yang, the positive and negative theory, and came with the earliest Chinese explorers more than 4,000 years ago. That the fulsome point in Cochino constituted a reverse borrowing by the Chinese from the American continent. That the Chinese were in America in a period at least as early as 2200 BC and came periodically up to a date as late as 500 AD, preceding Leif Erikson by more than 3,000 years. That the Chinese classic of mountains and seas, which for the past 2,000 years has been accepted by the Chinese only as myth, is no myth, but is actually true. That these two documents, faithfully preserved within the archives of China, furnish sufficient written proof that up to now has been lacking of Chinese exploration in America at a date as early as 2200 BC. We're jumping into this book, Ancient Explorers of America, from the Ice Age to Columbus. Okay, and this was wrote by Alec Loker in 2009. So right off the bat, what I wanted to show you here was this map. It says here in the caption, drawing based on a Chinese map purported to date to 1418, note the remarkably accurate depiction of North America. So it says up here that many other accounts of fusang, including histories and poems, describe the aspects of the country that fit with North America. According to one translation of the Shanghai Jing, the geography mentions 4 surveys of North America from Canada to Mexico that took place about 2200 BCE. These surveys apparently discovered the Grand Canyon, Baja California, and a high plateau of present-day Mexico City, as well as other notable continental features. Researcher Henrietta Mertz has compared the account of the surveyors of Fusang to modern-day maps and has shown that their descriptions accurately describe the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest, a slice through the middle of the continent from Montana through Colorado, and the geography of New Mexico and Mexico. These ancient Chinese records identify features such as rivers, mountain peaks, and Native American cultural aspects with clarity and accuracy to within a few miles over a span of 1,000 miles or thousands of miles. Mertz pointed out that the details extended to the direction of river flows, presence of mineral deposits, style of houses such as the roundhouses of the Southwest Indians of that period, and physical descriptions of Native Americans that correspond to our current understanding of those indigenous people of 4,200 years ago. The description of the Grand Canyon conclusively ties to 4,200 years ago account of the fusang to North America, saying that fusang was North America to them. Some scholars who have studied the Shanhai Jing and related antique circular maps now believe that the surveys conducted by the Chinese 4,200 years ago actually took place. They also postulate that the Chinese left people in America to colonize the vast country. Unfortunately, no maps positively dating that far back have been discovered. The maps that do exist in the written geographical accounts, however, do extend well beyond 2,000 years in the past. It seems clear that the Chinese historical record unequivocally claims that Chinese explorers visited America during Shun's reign, and it is equally clear that the Chinese maps had more accurate depictions of America long before the Western maps showed the New World in naive detail, or as terra incognita. On page 53, one such scholar, Joseph Needham, while traveling in Mexico, noted the many similarities between the Amerindian and Chinese cultures. He cited the similarity in motifs such as sky dragons, double-headed serpents, drums, compass, symbols, calendars, and paintings. Perhaps most persuasive was the fixation the ancient Chinese, Aztec, and Maya had on jade. In all three cultures, examination of grave goods revealed that corpses were buried with jade objects in their mouths, and these objects were coated in cinnabar. Many other similarities have been found by scholars knowledgeable of the ancient Chinese and the Native Americans of the first millennium of the Common Era. Neiman wrote, quote, "A mountain of evidence is now accumulating that between the 7th century BC and the 16th century AD, that is, throughout the pre-Columbian ages, occasional visits of Asian peoples to the Americas took place," unquote. According to an analysis of Fou-sang's report performed by Henrietta Mertz, the Buddhist monks made landfall in California near Point Hueneme, midway between modern-day Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. From there, they traveled 350 miles east, putting them near the modern-day town of Aguila, Arizona. At that location, they encountered the Mogollon people. They described how the society was a matrilineal one, that the men belonged to the Snake clan, and the women carried their babies in papooses on their back. The Buddhists spent most of their time in Mexico, living among the forerunners of the Aztecs in the Valley of Mexico, and then spending time among the Maya of Yucatan before returning to the west coast of Mexico. There they sailed away, returning to China after many years on their journey. I know I'm being long-winded when it comes to fusang, but this is so important to understand for those who do not know that the Chinese were here within America a long time ago. And as we do this research, it leads us to understand more of the Pacific Northwest and what is Mount Tum Tum.